In today's episode, we have Kris Rudeegraap, the CEO of Sendoso. Today, you're going to learn about his strategies on how he started in sales and became CEO of one of the fastest growing companies in the Silicon Valley. You're going to learn some of his playbook, where he talks about being creative with personalized outreach, using software like Upwork to get the job done, and how he's really focused on things like team selling and making sure that you're successful. So your success is our success. So let's get started.
From the heart of Silicon Valley in beautiful San Francisco, California, welcome to Sales Live Podcast with your host, Marco Cerna.
Awesome. Well, glad to be back on another episode of the Sales Live. Today, we have Kris Rudeegraap. Kris, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Marcus. I'm excited to be here today and chat with you.
Oh, yeah. This is going to be a good one because, for the audience, and, Kris will introduce himself, but kind of his trajectory to become the CEO of Sendoso, which is like one of the fastest growing companies in Silicon Valley, is pretty awesome because he started in sales and kind of like really like hits home because we are the sales life. But anyways, Kris, we always like to start off with some rapid fire intro questions. And so if you could just give us a quick background on kind of like your company, your role, size of team, that'd be great.
Yeah. So company is Sendoso. We're a sending platform that helps other companies send out direct mail, corporate gifts, work with a bunch of sales teams. I'm the CEO and co-founder. I started the company about 4.5 years ago, spent about 10 years in sales before that, a little over 400 employees now at the company.
Wow. Okay. So, it's a massive growth. I'm sure a lot of learnings. What I'm like pretty curious about, right, as far as your team, because, what is it called? LinkedIn, premium member, but you get to see what's the insights on LinkedIn. And I just see you guys are growing like 40% growth rate. And so I'm just curious, like how fast are you guys growing? And where do you guys expect to be in, the next few years?
Yeah. So, we doubled in size going into when COVID started till now. So that was a huge jump, especially since, we had to onboard everyone during COVID.
Yep.
So it puts us at about 400. I'd see, by next year getting to probably 600 or 700. So, a lot of opportunity across, sales, marketing, engineering, product, really all roles we're looking for.
Yeah, and actually the reason why I asked that question is because, I just get really curious about like how sales territories are divided, right? Mm-hmm. And so curious, like how that works at Sendoso. Do you, go by region? Are you guys starting to go internationally and global? Like maybe you could give us some insight into that.
Yeah. So we right now have a kind of a focus mostly on the segment size. So we have an SMB sales segment. We have a kind of commercial or mid-market, some people call it, and then an enterprise. And then within those, we actually just do round robins for inbounds and for outbound set by SDRs. There is a named accounts that our AEs are allowed to put in their name, and then they can also kind of go work in conjunction with the SDRs in order to set those meetings and get those accounts. But that's how we've set it up right now. We've thought about moving to a territory model, but we're kind of in that transitionary stage where we may look to that in probably the next year or so.
Oh, wow. So that's super interesting. So like, I'm pretty sure our audience will know what like round robin is, but maybe there's people that don't. But if I understand correctly, right? So if XYZ company in New Mexico says they want Sendoso, right? That just will go to the next person based on segment, the next AE, right? Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. So basically, the software looks at whoever is in the first in line, and then once they get a meeting, they go last in line, and then it just goes around like that. Whether it's an inbound from our inbound team or an outbound.
Oh, okay. Dang, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Curious on that though, and I know we'll get into kind of like your career path and trajectory, but how's that been? Because obviously, account executives are notoriously known for being very picky, right? So how does that typically go off on AEs when they hear it's just 100% round robin?
So I think there's pros and cons to it. I think the pro is that you can, if you're in a territory that's kind of a crappy territory, and you're going to be kind of at a disadvantage, or you're maybe it's a slower territory, then you're kind of like feeling, like I've got a bad territory. In this case, you don't really have a bad territory. You could get a company in anywhere in the world, really. And so it gives you that advantage. I think there's some disadvantages as we scale, and people can have in region, travel advantages. Like I'm going to go visit my customers in Seattle or my prospects, and then you just be able to go there and see them. So for more field sales focused territory makes a lot of sense. Right now, we're mostly inside sales, although the inside sales team does go into the field and travel to see accounts. But honestly, I think the round robin model it feels more friendly and gives reps a chance to who knows the next account they're going to get.
Yeah, you could end up getting an account like Okta or something, right?
Yeah,
and,
someone did get that, and and Okta is a customer now. So.
Oh wow, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So shout out Okta.
Yeah.
Obviously, I work there, but that's pretty cool. So that's actually pretty cool, because I think from a sales perspective, right? Like you mentioned, the ability to have a bad territory does exist, and so ability to get round robins can really help the morale of the organization. I'm curious on your end, and this is kind of like the last rapid fire question that I had. But as far as main personas you're reaching out to, so obviously Sendoso, I would think it's mainly more sales and marketing, but I could be wrong. There might be a hidden persona I don't know there, but is that typically who you're going to be reaching out to or working with in the deal process?
Yeah, so those are two main personas. So on the sales side, typically it's sales development, and then your general AEs or sales leadership. On the marketing, we see field marketing, demand gen, in some cases account-based marketing, and marketing programs. So there's a myriad of different marketing kind of leadership roles that will tend to be our personas. We also work with post sales, so customer service, customer success, account management. We kind of bucket that into CX and kind of think about it as all the customer experience side. And then HR has actually been a really hot vertical for us, or a persona for us lately, especially through COVID, where you're trying to send stuff to your team, and you want to engage your colleagues, reward your colleagues. We see quite a few head of people, head of HR, chief product officers interested in our platform too.
I always get interested in personas people reach out to, because I feel like there's always a hidden one, typically you go to Sendoso's website, you're like, oh yeah, sales and marketing 100%. But I knew there was a hidden one in there. Thanks for letting us know of the HR persona. So that's pretty interesting. But I kind of want to transition into kind of your path, because it's pretty fascinating, and something that I saw, and maybe you just have entrepreneurial blood in you from the start, but I saw when you went to college, you got, I think it was a $25,000 grant or some type of scholarship, right? So is that kind of what, gave you the ability to get into sales, or why did you even get into sales from the start?
Yeah. So, you're correct in saying that I think I have entrepreneurship in my blood. And, I grew up about an hour north of San Francisco. So even during the .com bubble, it was, I was hearing about the news, and, it sounded really exciting, but, I missed that trend because I was still going to school then. But, I always thought I was fascinated by startups, to seeing how they're able to scale and grow so fast. And so, in college, I came up with an idea called allstudentrentals.com. Basically like a Craigslist, or a way to find, rental housing to live in near your college campus. And so, I think a lot of ideas start with pain points. And so I was, painfully looking through Craigslist, and it wasn't the best experience. I was like, why isn't there a better student-oriented way to find housing, pay your rent online, find roommates, all in one kind of web app? And so I had the inspiration to actually take out a little bit of a student loan and go and find some engineers, and actually built it. And my co-founder and my co-founder was from my university too, but we ended up hiring some engineers up in Seattle that we found online. And so we were able to go to the Center for Entrepreneurship on campus, and they gave us 25 grand to kind of get the idea going. And so that was a fun way to really drive confidence in my ability to start a company and learn some of the ins and outs of software development and hiring. We ended up scaling to about 8 employees, and we partnered with about 15 different universities to power their kind of off-campus housing portals. And then ended up getting an opportunity to sell to a company in San Francisco. And so it wasn't necessarily life-changing money, but it was a great way for me to get to San Francisco, which in my eyes was like the mecca of startups at the time. And so I jumped at that opportunity. But going into that other company called Yapstone, which was about a 300-person company, I wasn't going to go in there as the new CEO. I was a fresh out of college kid. So really looked at opportunities and said, hey, I want to jump into sales. I liked the sales aspect of sales when I was at my own startup. And I think sales came natural to me because of that. And so, I kind of got addicted to doing sales at that company, did that for about 3.5 years there, ended up moving to a different company and doing sales there for about 3 years, and then moved to another startup and did sales for a couple of years there before really finding my inspiration for starting Sendoso.
Wow. I mean, that's pretty impactful. I'm sure there's people in the audience, but just me personally, because I started my own small art business, put me through college, debt free, all this stuff. But my goal was always to get into entrepreneurship. But then with entrepreneurship, it gave me the ability to get into sales at a company called Optimizely. So I kind of see that, very similar paths, but I think what's important is kind of analyzing some of those key wins, right? Mm-hmm. I'm curious, are there any tactical strategies that you might have learned, on the way? I'm sure there's a bunch of them, but any ones that stood out that you kind of want to share to our audience?
Yeah, so I think a couple things in terms of tactical strategies that I was always a big fan. The first one is really, I'm a huge fan of Upwork. I don't know if you've ever used Upwork or any of the audience has, but I think I've got over 200 grand spent on Upwork when I go look at how much I've spent there. And it was, even while I was an AE, I was, spending my own money on Upwork. I'd find virtual assistants to enrich leads for me while I'm sleeping, or I found find someone to scrape the top 100 list, and then they'd scrape it into a CSV for me. Or when I was at a couple early stage companies, and I'd hire a graphic designer to clean up a one pager for me. I even built I had this cool Where's Waldo tool, which would overlay someone's LinkedIn photo on a Where's Waldo picture. And then I would embed that in one of my last sequences of my email saying hey, where'd you go? P.S. If you can find Waldo, I'll give you a gift card for $25. And people would respond saying I found Waldo. He's right here in the bottom corner. And it was a fun way. So I think, Upworking, so to speak, or using Upwork was a tactical strategy to be in two places at the same time. I could be working while I'm sleeping by hiring somebody to do something for me. Or instead of copying and pasting a bunch of stuff, I just told someone else to do that. And then I was spending my time selling. So I still am a huge believer in Upwork. And actually Upwork was for my first kind of MVP version of Sendoso, found engineers through Upwork, and that's how Sendoso got started too. So,
interesting. Wow. Okay.
So I'd say that's one tactic that, I think there's endless things that you can do there. Even if you're in sales leadership and you need assistance with some sales ops reports, and you're trying to figure out how do I create some really intricate, sales forecast report, go to Upwork, post it. You'll get 20 people that are smarter than you that can do it in 2 minutes. So that's probably one of the biggest tactics that I empower my team to do too, is saying, hey, use Upwork when you can. Find someone that can do it for you instead of spending time struggling to figure it out.
Yeah, and I think what that comes down to is know that you're not the smartest person in the room. And I think you identified that. And then you're what, I'm just going to find experts that are, great at it, that can help me. And so I am curious though, right? Because like obviously the sales life is pretty hard, right?
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, 10 years and probably a lot of rejection. Half the battle though is like, just generating pipeline,
Mhm.
right? So I am curious at like what gave you the idea of starting like Sendoso? Was it like one day all of a sudden, like I'm picturing like maybe you and your sales office 8 p.m. and someone says no to a meeting, but you're like, you know what? I'm gonna send them a gift. I don't know. Like I always get curious about that.
Yeah. So I was always, I think creativity has been also my secret weapon as another tactic. I think it's harder to nail down that tactic because it's very broad. But when I think about creativity, it's just doing things differently. And so when I was in sales, I knew that everyone else was sending out a gazillion emails. So I was like, how do I get more creative to break through this noise and get some more meetings? And so I found myself, writing handwritten notes and sending them out, or I'd go walk down to Starbucks, grab a gift card and mail out a Starbucks card, or I'd go grab swag from the swag closet, or I'd have a conversation and someone mentioned that they've got a dog barking in the background, and I'd go to Amazon and find some little dog toy, ship it to my office, and then I'd write a little note, box it up and ship it out. And so I was doing a lot of these things, and I found myself seeing so much success with it that I was like, how do I do more of this better? Kind of going back to my Upwork, like how do I kind of outsource / scale this? And I was like, well, maybe I can convince marketing to do this because maybe marketing would help. Marketing's response was like, cool, great idea. This works well. We're doing some of this ourselves. Why don't you fill out a spreadsheet? And so then I filled out the spreadsheet, but it took them like months. I felt like to get stuff done. So it's like, I would write a note that said like, hey, looking forward to our meeting next week. And then it would show up like 3 weeks later. And I'm like, that's stupid. So, all those combined gave me the kind of epiphany of like, well, why the heck isn't there a button in Salesforce that I could just click and send something out?
Yeah.
And that was kind of like the light bulb moment, like, oh shit, like, why don't I build that? That's a big problem. I asked a bunch of my sales friends and they're like, yeah, of course I'd use that. That sounds like a great tool. Like I'm already doing some of the like writing notes or like trying to send stuff out. So if you could do it for me, like, please. And so I decided to like figure out what's like the easiest version 1 I could build. And the version 1 was actually called coffeesender.com. So it actually was just coffee gift cards because mentally I could fathom sending coffee gift cards. It felt easy. I felt like if I could build a little Salesforce app and a website and launch it, I at least see if people are willing to pay to click and send stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I went to Upwork, found an engineer, posted a job, $5,000 out of my pocket, and boom, had coffeesender.com and a Salesforce app. And then from there, just kind of was able to start selling a little bit and got a few $100,000 in sales from it and kind of proved my point. And this was kind of nights and weekends. So I was still a full-time AE. And then really was like, okay, this is more than just an idea. I need to really build this out. And so I quit my job to start Sendoso, which was kind of the real goal, which was, anything you could ever want to send, the warehousing, the logistics, the software, which, I had to go back to the drawing board and spend another, 9 months building. So.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, pretty awesome story. I feel like things like really resonate there, which is like your ability to just get it done, right?
Yeah.
Execution, right? And that's kind of what I've been seeing a lot, especially like, not only in sales, but in, to start your own company, it's, execution, because everyone will just be like, hey, hence the spreadsheet, just put on the spreadsheet, three weeks later, 3 months later, whatever, it doesn't get done. Right. Yeah. And so you found that problem, you went out and you made it happen.
Yeah.
I am curious though, right? Like when you're starting to make Sendoso, right? Like how are you recruiting, like, people to come work at your organization, right? Because, half the battle in sales is to find the right people. And so like, are you sending them gifts, like using Sendoso or really?
So I'd say like one of the things I look back on and from my sales career that I am very easily able to translate into my CEO entrepreneurship career is that recruiting at really a high level is sales. And so I found myself, building out a prospect list of who I want to work at the company. And then I figured out, how do I get in contact with those people? And then I figured out, okay, I'm going to get them into a meeting and I'm going to pitch them on joining Sendoso. And then I'm going to be persistent in order to get them on my team. And then I'm going to, continue to do this. And so, I find myself being able to translate my skill set into recruiting. And that really helped, because in the early days, you have to convince someone who's at a different job or doing something differently to go jump into a new idea and a new startup. And so I had to use my sales hat, put my sales hat on and sell them the dream of Sendoso and get them to join. So that really paid out in my advantage. And then additionally, when we decided to go raise venture funding, and we've raised, almost 60 million to date, that was also beneficial to have my sales experience, because I'd, run like a sales process with the VCs and, pitch them, slide deck, get them to commit to investing. And so, those areas really paid off for me.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like some of those basic things. And so, basic things in sales, right? Like just running an efficient deal cycle is like probably one of the most beautiful things once you execute it, and then you just want to repeat it, right? I'm curious about maybe diving a little bit deeper into, recruitment. Just because I am, really interested in, how do you find great sales talent? So obviously, let's maybe take you back a few years, when you just started, it's you and your co-founder, no one else. You got to create like that first sales hire. What are you doing? Like, are you not only vetting them out to make sure that they're the right hire, or like what makes a good Sendoso hire? And then also how fast are you trying to close these guys or girls to come to your company?
Yeah. So I think in the early days, I put together a list of people that I had some connection to, whether it was a past colleague, whether it was somebody I knew through a colleague, so it was kind of like a short list of people. And ultimately, our first two sales hires were colleagues at one of my past companies. So I knew they were good. I knew they were great. And I just had to convince them that Sendoso was a place to be at. They're both with us today in leadership positions, so it's paid off in dividends. But I think for the very first few people, it's how do you use your network to find those people? Because you aren't going to be as attractive as the next cool company that's already raised $1 gazillion and has got a cool product. We were very early, revenue or pre-funding almost, and just kind of selling the dream. And so it worked out well that I knew those people closer. Yeah. And I think that's, and then from there, it was a mix of, after that, doing kind of networking and asking our employees to refer their friends. And that was a good way in the early days. I built out a good advisory group that was introducing me to other folks for different roles. And then ultimately I got down to kind of cold calling for people. And I still do that today, or cold emailing, cold Sendosoing, cold outreaching through LinkedIn. And so I still, to this day, I mean, even this morning, I'm outreaching to people through LinkedIn and trying to, get them to have a meeting with me to tell them why they should join Sendoso. So,
wow. See, that's pretty awesome. And the reason why I think, first off, like when we first met, even before this, I was like, it's going to be a good episode, is because like, not only have you done sales, but what it takes to not only be persistent, but to also like go source your own deals, go source your own candidates, right? And so this is probably more of the tactical, right? But now obviously you guys have, some good product market fit, right? You guys are scaling and growing. You're probably trying to go after like, some larger enterprise sales teams, marketing teams, things like that. Like, how are some of your best reps kind of utilizing you in a deal cycle? Because I know a lot of the listener base, either AEs that want to figure out how they can bring in executive alignment to help them close a deal.
Yeah. So I am all about team selling. And so I look at it in a couple of different ways. I look at it and how can I open up my network and help introduce, our sellers to people that I know that I'm connected to directly. We also have a good amount of advisors. So I have about 100 advisors at the company and another probably 25 investors. So there's kind of over 100 other people that I'm first connected with that I will go out and look at their network and say, hey, one of our advisors is connected to the CRO at company XYZ. Do you want the intro? So I'm actually probably unique in that I say, hey, AEs and AMs and SDRs, come to me anytime you want, and I will try to get you networked somehow. And so the best of my colleagues are using that and coming to that. I also go the opposite route, and I'm proactively looking at opportunities in the pipeline too. And I will go see if I can connect the dots to somebody I know. And I'll say, hey, AE, guess what? I know the CRO here, FYI, if you need an introduction. And so I'm proactively helping our AEs too. And then outside of that, I'm a big fan of kind of co-selling with partners too. So I'm always trying to help strike up more partnerships, work with our partnerships team. And the more partnerships we can do, the more team selling we can do or co-selling we can do with partners too. But, I think for some of our newer AEs and SDRs and AMs, they might have come from companies that maybe don't have this open culture where the CEO is so like sales driven. But my suggestion there is just ask. It doesn't hurt to ask. You can also look at, and who are the investors and how can you just leverage this greater group of people that are wanting you to win? And I think some people, when they do team selling, look at maybe like their sales team and seeing if they can only connect the dots that small. But for me, it's our advisors, it's our partners, it's our investors, it's our C-level network, it's our colleagues. And so I would say go ask your CEO to help sell, and hopefully they'll help you.
Yeah, I'll always make the ask, right? And
yeah,
they can reject you, but I think that's a sign of your CEO if they reject you. But I think that's pretty awesome. I'm curious, is there any specific, would you say that there's a higher ability to get meetings through a connection that you kind of give an AE on your team? Or is it still like the same, like hard outbounding, still got to get the meeting type of thing?
No, I mean, I think we live in a sales world where you have to try anything and everything. And so, you've got to still put in work on, cold emailing, cold calling, sending Sendozos out, and using, team selling too. And so it's one of those things is going to work. And, however you break through the noise, or, even after you break into that first demo, how can you accelerate the deal? And so I love helping my team accelerate deals too by saying, hey, one of our investors knows this person that's at that account. And so I'm urge my team to always hit me up on deals, so much so that I've got some recent Salesforce process builder automations that send me emails when accounts are opened and at certain stages, so that I can proactively see how I can connect the dots for the team.
Gotcha. Because you got to scale it now, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You can't be on every meeting, right?
Yep.
That's so good. I'm huge on data though. And so I'm curious, and this is just more so on the product, but I'm sure with Sendoso, you have some good data on what gifts or what campaigns do well. Is there any insight that you can share to our audience that they can actually take today and actually go and implement it?
Yeah, so I'd say the unique thing about our platform is I think it's the creativity that you can do with our platform. And so it's not like a golden bullet where it's like, if you send a $5 Starbucks card, you're going to get a 10 out of 10 meetings. Mm-hmm. So I think that what I usually try to suggest is think about the creativity, just like you think about writing an email, and what is the note that goes along with the gift, and what is that gift, and whether I can share trends on certain areas of gifts, Yeti mugs tend to do really well, or gifts related to your alma mater, or Uber Eats and DoorDash gift cards and charity gift cards do well. And so we can share some of those insights. But I try to when I try to preach to what to send, I more or less try to say, hey, what you're trying to send to a person. So what would that person want? And what's the note that's going to accompany that gift or mailer that would be personal to that person, and really make people think harder about it than just what you can send. So
interesting. Yeah, it kind of seems like it's still the chase, but adding the gift is kind of a nice, ability, right?
Exactly. And I think that, with automation of maybe email and other tools that, if sales reps can spend more of their time kind of trying to be human and creative and spending 3 minutes on like, what can I send to this person to break into this account, and really kind of get into that mindset and almost like, block time on their calendar as they would for prospecting or, researching leads to, creatively thinking about what to Sendoso.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. But hey, I'm sure there's a lot of reps out there that thank you and Sendoso for helping them be successful, hit quota, and probably make some good, money. So like,
exactly.
I'll say thank you on behalf of the audience. But yeah, now kind of like moving in, this is the last segment, right? Some rapid fire outro questions. The first question is typically the hardest, so hopefully you're ready. But do you love to win or do you hate to lose?
That's a good question. I would say I love to win more. I'm a huge, popping champagne. I'm a huge fan of like micro winning too, where I'm like purposely try to figure out what are small wins that I can have in order to build momentum and keep the energy levels up. And that was something I did in sales too, where I'd, even if I didn't close a deal in a day, I'd say, hey, I look at my metrics and say, hey, I set 6 meetings today. And so like, that's a win. And I'd always try to celebrate those wins because I think the positive energy can give you momentum.
I love that. I was telling, I mentor a lot. I was saying to one of my mentees, I was like, you got to celebrate the small wins in order to celebrate the big wins. Right?
Exactly.
And so I just absolutely love that. Where I'm huge on knowledge, right? Transfer books. So like, what are some, good sales books or just books in general that kind of, you really advocate for? Just curious on that.
Yeah. I mean, my favorite books, I love Malcolm Gladwell as an author. Those are a little bit more psychology books, but I think sales is kind of about psychology too. So his book, Blink or Tipping Point, I really like the psychology and the thoughtfulness that go into those books and how he writes the stories and how he like really thinks about how the audience is going to react. So those are that's probably a couple of my favorite books there. I'm a big podcast guy too. So I listen to a ton of podcasts. So I think podcasts are a good way to listen to knowledge, bite-sized knowledge, or shorter time span than having to read a whole book.
Yeah, I'm huge on podcasts too. Like, even though I have my own podcast, I listen to a bunch of podcasts. Have you checked out a podcast called Hunters and Unicorns?
No, I will check that out.
Yeah, it's and if they're listening, I don't know, I'll probably butcher it, but basically they are interviewing like some of the top executives in Silicon Valley from a guy named John McMahon. So basically he, was working at, I think he was like, I can't remember the company specifically, Blade Logic, right? And then he ended up having like 33 CXOs that are like, the CEO of MongoDB, all these people. So they learned Playbook. And it's these like 1 hour deep dives with these, CROs and CEOs, and they just kind of share their knowledge on their sales playbook. And it's pretty fascinating. So check that out.
Sounds really fascinating. I just wrote that down. I'm going to check it out.
Yeah, for sure. And then the last question is like, where can people get in touch with you? Is that solely LinkedIn? Is that email? And we'll put it in our description as well.
Yeah, I mean, definitely find me on LinkedIn, add me, love to connect or see how I can help. Email works good too. It's Kriss, Kris at Sendoso.com, and could put that in the notes as well. And I'm always into networking, meeting new people, and we're hiring.
Hey, there you go. There's a plug, right? What I would suggest though, for the audience, right? Because we'll do a summary here, but what I would suggest is be personalized, find something that resonated from today's episode and message Kriss.
Yep.
Maybe, do a plug for Sendozo, I don't know. And hey, you might find yourself working there. But anyways, Kriss, appreciate your time today. And, thanks again for joining the Sales Life. I had a blast interviewing you today.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Marcos. This was great.
All right. See you. Bye-bye.
See ya.
Thank you for listening to Sales Live Podcast. If you like this episode, please share, comment, and subscribe. Tune in to next week for a brand new episode and have a fantastic week. And I'd like to remind you, if you'd like to be a guest on Sales Live Podcast, please reach out to your host, Marco Cerna, on LinkedIn. Profile link is in the description.